Well, there are peace talks happening regarding the violence in Ethiopia that's been raging for months, if not years. Representatives from Ethiopia's Oromiya region went to Tanzania for a second round of talks with the Ethiopian government to try and end decades, really, of fighting. The talks are being negotiated by peacekeepers from the US, the East African trade bloc IGAD, and Norway. Here to discuss violence in Ethiopia and the state of these peace talks is Senate Senay. She is speaking on behalf of the Genocide Prevention in Ethiopia, which I believe, right, is an American human rights group. You're based in the US, is that correct?
That's correct, Natalie. Thank you for having me again. And yes, we're based in the USA, but it is an international group that has hubs and working groups all over the world.
So, something that you're busy doing is trying to raise awareness about the violence in Ethiopia. You say that other conflicts in the world are overshadowing this. That's clearly true. Can you explain the conflict and the current state of the peace talks, please?
Okay, thank you. So there are two things going on concurrently. The peace talk that the government is holding with the Oromo Liberation Front slash Oromo Liberation Army is something that has been going on, I think, for more than a year. There was a time when they went to Seychelles. I think Norway was the chosen mediator, and there was back and forth over the years. And in this, there is the actual calamity that is going on where the government has opened war in Amhara region. And this is after the northern Ethiopian war that spanned Tigray region, Amhara region, and Afar region was concluded 2 years after its start on November for 2020. So they literally concluded it through the Pretoria Agreement with TPLF, where Amaras and Afaris were not represented on November 4, 2022. So now this other agreement again is going on concurrently, while the war in Amhara region is waged by the Ethiopian regime against the Amhara people with the Oromo Liberation Front. So, as it is, it's a very complex situation where OLF was actually massacring and killing ethnic Amaras in Wallagga and Metekel, which is in the west side of the Oromo region, and the so-called Benishangul Gumuz region, again in the west of Ethiopia. So in both cases, when we look at the Pretoria Agreement that happened with TPLF in South Africa in 2022, and now the ongoing agreement with OLF, in both cases, Amaras were victims, and they were not, and in case of the war also actors, but they were not represented in both cases. Specifically with this ongoing talks with OLF, it's the most confusing one because there has been, especially lately, in the beginning, when this government took the reform the reformed, position since 2018, all the massacres were just singularly being blamed on OLF. But over the years, recently, there was huge evidence by the survivors themselves that this is state sponsored, that there is coordination between regime forces and OLF. There were times when they would turn off telephone services, electricity, water before OLF people went in and attacked. So it is very confusing what they're agreeing on about, since they coordinated on many of the civilian attacks in those areas. So to us, to a lot of us, not just at the GPE, but the Amhara human rights groups at large, and political groups in Ethiopia in general that oppose this regime, for them, it looks like and sounds like the regime is consolidating its agreement and back channeling with both TPLF and OLF, so they can all together go and attack and finish off the war against Amaras.
Okay, now the government says it just doesn't want a repeat of what happened in Tigray to happen in Amara. But by that, they mean that the Tigray army had full control of the region and had been, by many reports, blocking aid to civilians, and civilians were caught in the middle. Is that actually a fair comparison? What's happening to the Amara region?
Not at all. If that was the case, Tigray region is now fully controlled by the belligerent that was part of the war, the Tigray People Liberation Front, which turned into the transitional government in Tigray. That's not what's going on in Amara region. In Amara region, actually, the people that went up and tried to defend themselves from the onslaught of the TPLF forces during the Northern War, they were actually blamed for causing human rights abuses, while all they did was defend themselves within their territory. And on top of that, now the government is blaming them for an uprisal, when what actually happened was the government was only selectively trying to unarm Amharas, even if the Pretoria Agreement was about, the Tigray forces to be unarmed first. That didn't happen. The ongoing civilian massacres that amount to genocide in the rest of the country outside the region, the Amhara region, has exacerbated. And all these displaced people that are pushed into the Amhara region and already under, a disadvantaged group, have been without any support, and the situation pushed Amaras to a point of no return, where they had to fight for their survival. So to compare a government that actually is chosen and fought along with Integrai, with in case of the Amhara, where they're fighting against the government that is imposed on them. The Amhara regional government itself is an enemy to the people, and the federal government is sending their air force, their mechanized forces, drones, etc. They're full force on the people. There is no aid going into the country. There is a siege. Amaras cannot go into the capital city, and they're literally being hunted down elsewhere in the country as well. So the only thing that the people have is their self-armed group called Fanos that are protecting themselves at best.
Right. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Fanos? So that you say they are fighting on behalf of Amhara, but there are reports that Fanos are finding their own fight against the army in the medieval holy city of Lalibela. Just last week, that's what residents there told Reuters. The government said, actually, no, that's peaceful. So who are Fanos, and are they fighting two wars at the same time, or are these the same wars?
No, there's a single war, and that is the fight for survival for Amaras. So what's going on is the government has huge. I seriously, Natalie, I would say if a foreign invader came into the country, there would be no one to protect the country. The full force of the nation, whether it's the intelligence forces, money spent for propaganda, for drone oil, for bombs, etc. Everything is going against Amaras, and Amaras, regardless of their three major division, like they follow three major regions, religion, this Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and all of them, regardless of religious differences or minor like dialect differences, etc., they're standing together to survive this onslaught. So what happened in Lalibela is no different from towns that elsewhere in Amhara region. So the Fanos, whenever the abuses by the occupying forces, the regime forces, become so great, when they go door to door, gun down young people for fear that they may join the Fano, the Fanos would come into the town, control, get things in order, and quickly leave, because they don't want civilians to be hit because of them. They don't want to make urban civilian population as a shield. They don't want to use that, and they're known for this. Throughout the war, they had a single bank hasn't been touched, a single infrastructure hasn't been touched. At best, in rural areas where they control, they actually tried to continue farming and schooling activities. So in case of Lalibela, it's unfortunate because it's one of the wonders of the world, and it needs to be protected. But the attack on civilians from regime forces has become so great that they have to go in, protect the people, and leave before the government took it as an excuse to to hit this cultural heritage and also kill more civilians.
Okay, thank you for breaking that down, because the tribal warfare is confusing if you are not familiar. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the global response, because by many reports, there are 9 million people that have fled or are in need of humanitarian aid. But the world is busy looking at now Israel and Ukraine. Last month, you say the mandate for the Body International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia was established by the UN Human Rights Commission to investigate crimes against humanity in Ethiopia, and it was terminated when no one came forward to sponsor it. So, talk to me a little bit about the extent of this and the lack of interest in it.
You're right. It's very frustrating because even human rights, even if we do know, in all these Western nations, I mean, all over the world, the people of any nation actually want the best for the people of any other nation. So it's not the citizenry that we're frustrated about, but governments truly, they always bring their geopolitical interests forward, of course. So the ICHRE was established during, the time of the Northern War. And with its timeline itself, we were really fighting for it to, hindcast its start time a little bit further, because uh, human rights, violations didn't start on November 4, 2020 in Ethiopia. So at least starting from the so-called reformed government took power in 2018, in April, where the first massacre happened September 2018. So at least going back 2 years, would have at least, no, 4 years would have at least captured uh, some of the horrific, uh, human rights violations and crimes against humanity. It's not just that. It was also limited in special extent. It limited itself. Excuse me. So it limited itself in Amhara, in Tigray region, Amhara and Afar, with its budget only extending to abuses that happen mostly in Tigray, and then not anywhere else. But a lot of crime against humanity has happened in Welega, in Matakal, etc., which later on their mandates has extended, but they were not budgeted to look into it. So when you look at it all in all, these mandated like special rapports or commissions, etc., seem to be established to limited in scope in a certain way so that they can cover certain incidents. And if we do really want to address human rights abuses and really get transitional justice to victims, regardless of their ethnic background, whether they're Tigrans, Afari, Amara, Oromo, Somali, etc. We have over 84 ethnic groups in Ethiopia, and over 10 of them are actually very, very involved in a very complex, groupings of this special targeting, and some are targeters and some are targeted. So with Amaras actually undergoing genocide. So we believe that it is important for an independent body, a UN mandated body, to study the situation, get the actual timeline, get the actual special extent, get the scope right, so that nobody's left out by technicality, and so that we get justice. And the other important thing is that there was no political groundwork being done, no enough political pressure applied. So the commission members or any one of their technical researchers were not allowed on site. So whatever they were doing at best could be used for political pressure, maybe if those other countries choose to use it, and the Security Council maybe, but never for actual transitional justice. It's not something that can be used at court, because it was a bunch of remotely done research. So I think it's very important to look into this, not just for the sake of delivering justice, but because there's a lot of ongoing human rights abuses right now in Ethiopia, and the government is, at the position of protecting its position at any cost. So lately, what happened was, the countries at the Human Rights Council didn't sponsor. No country has sponsored to continue the mandate of ICHRE, but what the EU chose to do is to kind of give a huge financial package or pledge for the Ethiopian government itself to facilitate a transitional justice framework. So there's only one thing that I want to say here, especially for Amara victims. This would never work, because the framework through which they want to do this, the ethnic constitution, Amaras were not even on board in 1994 when it was established. So it right away will disadvantage Amaras to start with. And for the rest of all the other victims, because most of the incidents that are in question, regardless of non-state actors taking part, are state sponsored. There is no way this government is going to make an impartial body that could deliver transitional justice for all victims. And finally, there is no legal framework that can look at crimes against humanity in a sufficient way in Ethiopia, because it's not fully contained in our legal framework in Ethiopia. We don't have the articles that can actually be used as a basis of judging this crime. We don't have it in Ethiopia. So that's why it won't work to entrust this government to do either transitional justice or national dialogue that precedes that, none of that.
So that's what you think will come of the peace talks because the Ethiopian government is participating. Your expectations are that they cannot come to a solution that would bring any kind of peace to the Amhara region. Is that correct?
So yeah, what I expect out of the peace talks is that a bunch of groups that had minor problems within each other are coming together to stand against what they think is their bigger problem, which is Amaras. Because basically, Amaras stand against this genocidal system, which is an ethnic apartheid, which each of the separatist groups, whether it's TPLF, OLF, or the party itself at the helm, it's their bread and butter. That's what they get their budget. That's how they divide the nation and rule. So they would do anything to come together and stop this movement that is rejecting the system.
So then, are there any Amhara representatives at this peace talk then that can give any hope to this region? Are you saying that they're not even represented?
No, not at all. So
Okay.
they have OLF and government representatives being represented, but the victims in those regions, I think this shows that the Amaras in Oromo region, they are non-existent to them,
Yeah.
because they're labeled, it doesn't matter for them whether they agree about this peace agreement or not. The fact that a government is agreeing with a party that it dubbed is terrorist, using through its own People's Representatives Council, and they didn't even undeclared that they didn't remove that label before they went to talk to them.
Well, thank you for bringing us this story. You can follow more online on X, the Genocide Prevention in Ethiopia, or Senate on X or Twitter as well. Thank you for always keeping us abreast of what's going on here. And, it's definitely worth noting where the world's attention is. So it's always good to talk to you.
Thank you very much for having me at the Redacted. Thank you, Natalie. I enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at Redacted.INC. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to Redacted.INC. We'll see you next time.